All right, I'm Christopher Pottinger, and this is my story. Um, I've been at Kingdom. The choir told me the other day it's been about 9 years. I got here when we were at a 45, 30 popular level, and the way I got here was a sort of a unique circumstance. Um, Brother Ray, who runs our sound, um, me and him have been friends since, man, like the '90s, and so I had, when I was living in Boston, I was going to school in Boston. I had came down to Louisville or Indiana, Clarksville, New Albany area, because he was living there for a while, and I came down a few times to visit, hang out with him, and so I knew he was in this area. So fast forward years, 20 years maybe, 15 years later or what have you, um, I was in a situation where I thought I was about to move back to Boston and try to go to school, get in grad school or something. And so I called Ray and was like, hey, I'm gonna go see my sister and my brother-in-law for a few months in Lexington. So, if you know some churches that might need a bass player, for, a month or two, let me know. And he was like, I do, my church. And so he was telling me about the church and everything. I was like, okay. But to backtrack, the way that conversation even happened is I was a touring musician. I was living in LA, well, Rancho Cucamonga, but I was working out of LA, and just touring with different artists, um, R&B, hip hop type artists, and I remember it was this one phase where I was playing for like 3 different artists. It was working out. I was playing with Boys to Men, Jason Derulo, and then I was doing dates with this artist named Tayo Cruz, and it just so worked out to where I was able to kind of do all the spot dates with him. But at the time, I had been doing this, playing for artists for a number of years now. At the time, I had really started, I felt myself veering off, probably more than normal. It was like I was veering off the path to the point where even if I wasn't claiming to be saved, I wasn't really at that time. But, I knew God and everything. And, I definitely had my periods where I was like hungry for God and everything. But I felt myself really starting to go left. And I could feel it like in me. And then I remember just kind of, it's kind of like one day you just looking like, man, what is wrong with me? It was kind of scary. Like, if I don't get off this path, I could end up being the person that we usually talk about, or I would normally talk about or condemn. So around that time, it was weird. I remember I got a phone call from my buddy who put the band together for these dates we were doing with Boys and Men. And he said, hey, man, they decided to go in another direction. It was like, what? Okay. So I lost that gig. And then I had another gig that I had weekly. Then I ended up losing that. And it just seemed like over a 3-month period, I lost like $2,000 a month worth of, income on average. And I'm like, wait a minute now. And I'm trying to, I still got bills and everything, but everything just kind of started falling apart over a real short amount of time. But in that time, like they say, sometimes it has to get rough in order for you to get on your knees and start talking to God. So I remember I started back praying and so forth, and yeah, a lot of good things started happening on the inside, but the physical circumstances were still there. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna get out of LA. And one reason was because I felt if I stayed there, I would eventually just get back on that path where I was veering off and going way left. So I ended up letting go of my apartment, everything. I moved back home where my family was in Stockton for like, I think I was there for like a month or so. And in that month, that's when I have reached out to Ray, and I just made this decision. I'm going back to Boston. Um, I knew Boston very well. I went to school there and so forth. But I called my sister in Lexington. I said, hey, I'm going to come stay with you guys for a little bit, just hang out, really. And I'm like, okay, cool. Then I got out here, and that was when Ray said, come to the church, and just kind of, So that ended up happening. I came to Kingdom Fellowship, and we were at 4530, and that was the first time I heard Pastor Finley preach, and I was like, man. And it wasn't so much that he was a good preacher, but he was actually saying some real stuff, like some old school stuff, like what I'm used to. But he had this kind of, he still had that modern edge to himself. But I would be sitting there, and I mean, I can't count how many times, really in that first year, I would have been reading a particular scripture earlier that day or the day before, and I got to Bible class or Sunday service, and he went to that scripture. God, if I'm lying, cut my head off right now. I mean, it happened so much, I almost stopped being surprised by it. And when that would happen, it was like, man, it was like a confirmation. Like I said, I didn't have a plan to be here or be at Kingdom Fellowship. But when I got here, it was just like, man, everything I'm reading or I go to study, he's just hitting it. He's just hitting it. And those are the kind of things where you say, that's not coincidence. I have this thing where I say, one time is an incident, 2 times is a coincidence, 3 times, now you've established a pattern. And that was it. It became a pattern. And I think that pattern helped me stick through even the rough times we had, because as a church we went through a few rough times, transitioning. We had to use the hotel for 1 minute, then we were at the gym. But and I think there was 2 times I sat with him. I was like, Bishop, it's time for me to, I always call him Bishop. Like, yes, I think it's time for me to dip. But somehow it never happened. And and there were definitely times where physically you were like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, but something just kind of compelled you to stay and just stick with it. And I'll say this, I thank God that through his grace that I did, because I certainly was blessed over the years by the church, all the people that I met. Brother Ray even introducing me to the church. And, I've definitely had, a great experience, being here under, I'm so used to calling him Bishop. I was about to say Bishop Finley, but yeah, Pastor Finley, Pastor Tim Finley, and all of the people I've met, Elder Cheeks, Sister Cheeks, Mom Finley, Pastor's mom, everybody, I've been truly blessed. All of our music staff, obviously Ray, Jamil, she's like my little sister who forced her way into my life, because I'm like a really close person, but she kind of just forced herself, and then I'm glad she did, because she's awesome. And my girl Tiff and Stephanie and Lyric and Will shared everybody. It's definitely a family atmosphere. But long story short, not to give all, I'll give the ugly details that y'all like, the dirty details in part 2. But right now we're gonna keep it. We're gonna keep it on the surface. But I thank God for my experience here.